Welcome to Just a Conversation. Today I'm going to be with Stephanie Vaughn from PSYCHe. My first impression when I first met you, I'll just say that you were incredibly bold. And I remember I was talking about something and I said, I can't do that because it doesn't look good. And you said, who cares? And I thought, I've got to know you. Why did you create PSYCHe?
So why did I create PSYCHe? I guess it's a little different than what, or maybe it's the same. I don't know why that's important to me. I grew up, my family, a bunch of attorneys, and I used to want to go to school and be a lawyer, and ended up in the field that I'm in. Very similar field in a way. I mean, we have to make an argument sometimes with our clients. You know, cognitive therapy is really a lot like litigation. But in growing up with a family of attorneys, we had a few outliers, family members maybe, who get off track and things. And sometimes the way that, you know, the family members get off track with drugs and things, we would need more than just once a week, you know, coming in and talking to someone. And I remember it didn't matter when we would all talk about what needed to happen. It didn't matter what we needed, or it didn't matter what the client, I get my relative, would need. It was a lot of constraint from the field itself. Like, well, therapy is you come in and you talk for 45 minutes or 50 minutes or an hour or whatever. And you didn't do anything, no phone coaching, which is something that we do. That's a dialectical behavior therapy thing. There was no follow-up or continuity of care, I guess they call it now. If you would send someone to treatment and then they would get discharged, there was no follow-through, no hand-holding, so to speak.
Yeah.
And even in my training, therapists would talk like the family was a barrier or was something to keep out of treatment, whether that's parents of an adolescent or the extended family, that they were a problem. We wanted to try to keep the person, sheltered and protected, and we want to not disclose a lot of things. And I just found that to be ridiculous, because the family, which was us, at the time, knew so much about this person that nobody else knew. And particularly when it came to, drug use, that family member was going to lie. They were going to lie. It made sense. And so I said to myself, and it wasn't just one family member, there were more than one, but I said, when I get in this field, it's going to be about doing the best for the person that I see, not what everybody else is doing. Not, well, sessions are 45 minutes and so that's what we do, or not once a week because that's what we do, or we don't disclose because that's what we do. At the end of the day, to me, you've got to be able to sleep with yourself, and you've got to be able to feel like you did the right thing. And that goes beyond the limits of what our field sometimes says to do. Like phone coaching. I can remember when I was taught, you don't have any kind of contact between sessions with your patient. But now, that the field has changed, the idea has changed, and now phone coaching is well supported, but some people still think that it's not okay to have sessions between, to have a phone coaching between sessions. But if it's the thing that's going to make the person get better and it's the right thing to do, then that's what we need to do.
Yeah.
And we can't just rely on, well, that's what everybody else does, and so I'm going to hide behind that. So I guess you could call that boldness.
Yeah.
But I want to make sure everybody who comes on, there are hours we're taking them kind of under our wing, and I want to make sure that we do the best that we can. A good job,
Yeah. Well, like you said, whatever the right thing is, you're doing the right thing. For that client, for that client's family, for the whole unit. Ideally, you don't want your clients to come back once they've gone through everything that needs to go through for them to process whatever it is. Then it's like, okay, go enjoy, live your life. And if you want to come back at, sporadically, great, but ideally, don't. you know?
Agreed. And I don't like the attitude that everybody has to be in therapy. I don't believe that. I don't think everybody needs to be in therapy. I don't think that therapy is something you have to do forever. I think that, if you enjoy it, great. But to imply, that really puts us in a position, it's a great business model, puts us in a position where we always have people that we can choose from. But I just don't believe that. Therapy has only been around, not nearly as long as human beings have. And so I think we've had trauma since human beings were created. We've resolved trauma since human beings were created. But we didn't have someone necessarily, to tell us how to set the agenda for the day and how to do exposure activities between session. So I value, the individual healing of each person and how they do, how they thrive best, how they heal best. So I don't like cookie cutter approach, everything for everyone.
Have you always been this way? Have you not just, no, but seriously, have you always because you said to me that you're from, so say where you're from again?
Georgia, North Georgia.
So you're from North Georgia. Is that whatever? Because I don't think I've been to North Georgia, but is that what everyone's like? Why?
I'm sure they would just love to know that I was representing. I can't say that I would represent, all of North Georgia, but my family's got a lot of, I guess, attitude or strength or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Opinionated. Again, they're attorneys, a lot of attorneys, so
it's a lot of opinion.
They're very opinionated. And when I'm teaching the therapists here, new therapists, I always say, have an opinion. Have an opinion. Don't be afraid to have an opinion. We want to be non-judgmental and we want to have an opinion. So it's both at the same time. Well, how can you be non-judgmental and have an opinion? Well, first you've got to be non-judgmental. You've got to listen long enough, really listen. And you got to wait. You have your hypotheses, right? We did this on the board earlier today with my therapist. I listed the hypotheses on the right, and I said, in your job, take those hypotheses and prove them wrong, not prove them right.
What do you mean, so take the hypotheses, and what do you mean by that?
So if you have a hypothesis about a client, she's just doing this for attention, right? So it's a hypothesis. It's an automatic thought. You can't necessarily stop yourself from having it.
Yeah.
At the same time, you've got to be aware that that's not truth. There may be parts of truth to it or something, but it's just a hypothesis. So you've got to go in knowing that you've got that bias potentially in mind, and then say, okay, well, where's the evidence that this is not true, right? Just like scientists do. Where's the evidence this is not true? It's possible that this is true. But where's the evidence that this is not true? And so because otherwise you've got confirmation bias. You've got your glasses on, you can see everything the same. So, I think we just have to listen very carefully, and then we have an opinion. As we go through, we say, okay, well, this is my opinion. My opinion is, you could benefit from doing some trauma work. You could benefit from coming in and telling your story, the bad thing that happened, over and over and over and over and over, until all of that, isn't so painful anymore.
Yeah.
And at the same time, do I think that you can do it on your own? Absolutely, I think you could, and you don't have any more need of me than the man in the moon. You could go and do it on your own. So I've got to have that level of certainty and confidence and opinion. I've got an opinion, but I've got to leave room for the other person to disagree, because they could be right. Most often they are. If it's about themselves, they're usually right. But if we don't listen long enough, and we've got to be right, then we don't get it. We don't get the good stuff.
Is that how you are as a therapist?
I'm exactly the same as a therapist as I am as a friend, or as a just talking now.
Yeah.
Maybe as a friend I'm not so uptight, but but yeah, that's the way I am.
But having an opinion, as a therapist, isn't that a little bit? That's a sketchy area. No, but seriously.
I was thinking the word sketchy.
Yeah, because a lot of people that come to you could come to you wanting you to tell them what to do. And so when you give an opinion, your opinion coming from your heart, they can hook onto it and say, but you told me.
Yeah, for sure.
Aren't you ever concerned of that?
There's so many things to be concerned about, Diane, On that note, one of the things that I teach is that when you have an opinion, make sure that you make it yours, that you say it's mine. This is my opinion. And the implication, or you outright say, and I could be wrong, totally wrong.
Yeah.
And here's how I could be wrong. And you can lay that out.
Did you ever think you'd have a company of your own?
I don't know. I don't think I thought that far. I don't think that far, I guess.
Yeah.
And one of the stretches is trying to think out. They say, oh, you should do the 5-year plan and the 10-year plan. I don't think I would have gone as far as I did, as I am, if I would have thought that far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had this really cool thing. I've been watching. You ever heard of a guy called Ed Mylett? He's like this inspirational business leader, and he was interviewing this guy called John Maxwell. But the cool thing that he said, he was talking about how what's the difference between successful people and those that aren't as successful. And this guy said, he said, see success as this. He said, imagine you're in a car park at night. He said, and you turn on the car lights. He said, you've got to get home, but the car lights are only 300 feet around you. He said, but you've got to get home, and you trust that journey home, you're going to make it. And you're just going to trust 300 feet in front of you. He said, that's the difference between somebody who's successful and who's not. He said, because those who don't take that chance, who want to know everything,
Yes.
don't look at the 300 feet and trust the process, they get off it. And they're just like, okay, I won't go there. I need to know.
One of the things I always say is don't solve problems you don't have yet. Because you got enough problems,
Don't solve problems
you don't have yet.
Give me an example of that.
Well, you can think about all of the potential problems. I mean, anything you've got to do for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
You could think, well, what if this happens, or what if that happens? And sometimes when I'm doing trainings for DBT, therapists will raise their hand and they will say, well, what if you had a client who said they were going to, and it's like, there are so many different variables that go into that question. There is no possible way that I could give you an answer to, well, then this is what you would do. So what problem do you have now? And you solve the problem that you've got now. And then if another problem is created, then you solve that one, But you can get ahead of yourself and never even start because you're trying to solve, or you're trying to predict, well, if I say that, then she's going to say this.
Yeah.
And then when she says this, then I'm going to say this. And then you just never start.
Yeah.
I hate when people think they know what I'm going to say, and so I try to give other people a courtesy of not predicting either.
I bet you get really annoyed when people finish your sentences or try to.
I don't know. That doesn't happen very often.
Oh, I wonder why. I wonder why. No, but okay. So then CBT, DBT, radically open DBT.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw you do a really good presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah, you did a really good presentation. So now, for somebody that doesn't know what those things are and is looking at you now like, do I need it? Would it be good for me? How could you simplify in a small paragraph for each of them? What do they do?
CBT is the big umbrella. It's the hot thing. It has been for a long time. Cognitive behavioral therapy. If you put cognitive behavioral therapy in Google and you put any sort of problem, you will be able to find research that suggests that cognitive behavioral therapy is beneficial in some shape, form, or fashion.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a big topic. It's too hard to go into all the nuances, but it's like the broad, it's the broad picture. DBT is a type of CBT. It just has extra things added in. DBT's been supported more and more for different types of issues, but basically the underlying problem is you've got trouble regulating your emotions. You've got trouble with your internal thermostat, so to speak. It's not steady, and it seems to go all over the place, and you want real practical things. Then DBT is the thing for you, And, all of the therapists here who teach it, we all talk about how the skills are just super practical, and we actually have a practice of doing the skill every week. We fill out a worksheet just like clients do. We come in and we turn it in and talk about it and everything. So, you have to practice it really. Yeah. It's just like a foreign language or something. You have to practice it to make sure that you're doing it.
Yeah.
Now, RODBT is new. It's the newest. I like being on the cutting edge of whatever is the latest and greatest in it. And so if DBT, traditional DBT is for externalizing, I think of like behavior, that would be more of a firecracker.
Okay.
Your folks who are going to do well with RO DBT more implode. Like I don't like putting these in a nutshell so much just in case, but you may have a person who self-harms or gets suicidal. One type of person will tell you about it, or one type of person wouldn't mind having all that on the outside, and another type of person would rather pull out their own teeth and let anybody know that, and they're very secretive, private, know. So RO, or radically open, is for that quieter, more private type of individual, the person who has difficulty connecting with others. A lot of times your traditional folks in DBT don't have trouble connecting with others. They have trouble sustaining relationships. Whereas RO, with RO group, they're going to have trouble with actually the initial stages of forming a relationship. They have trouble with trust. Many times they'll have issues like anorexia, OCPD, obsessive compulsive disorder, and borderline personality disorder that's a quieter type of issue.
Why did you get into what? Because psyche is based around these principles. Why is this you attracted to this?
You mean DBT?
Yeah.
I went into this field because I thought, what would I like to do with my day? I mean, I literally remember where I was, and I thought, what would I like to do for a job? And I thought, I'd like to sit across from someone like this and help them solve their problems, because I was doing that all the time anyway. That was my hobby, and there's nothing worse than a therapist who is not doing therapy, because they will do therapy on people around them. So they need to have a job to do what it is that they do. Yeah, so that's a little sidetrack. But when I was in graduate school, I got my shiny new DSM. The DSM is the diagnostic Bible, and I didn't know what a DSM was. But I went through and I was like, oh, this is so interesting. Look at the personality disorder. This is, Aunt so-and-so or Uncle so-and-so and cousin so, And so, or my friend, my whoever, and I was writing things down.
Yeah.
And I didn't think anything of it. And we were in my diagnostic psychopathology class, and they came up on borderline personality disorder. And I thought, I knew exactly. I had two people in my life who I was close with, and they had BPD, and I was like, yeah, it's so-and-so and so-and-so. But the room was, there was a little snickering, and there was some sideways comments, and I realized that there was a lot of opinion about borderline personality disorder that was I had no idea about, because my undergraduate program was research-based, so I didn't know anything about what they were all talking about, and I certainly wasn't going to raise my hand and say, well, what's so bad about borderline personality disorder? I have people, that I really like. I wasn't about to do that. So I decided that I was going to research all about it. And when I say research, it makes it sound really smart, but basically what I did was just get every single book that I could find. Every single book, every single piece of anything I could get my hand on about BPD, I did. And I read it in my spare time. I drove down to Atlanta for school from North Georgia, so it was about an hour and a half drive, and I would listen to audiobooks and continuing educations all the way down and all the way back. So I got 3 hours of extra education every day, that I didn't get at school, and just learned and learned and learned about it so that I could figure out why everybody had such a strong opinion. So what I found was, after reading all of the material I could get my hands on and listening to everything I could, was that the majority of the material was really pejorative. Pejorative is a fancy word for just mean, So it was mean about the way that they would write about predominantly women with BPD, and it really paternalistic, made it sound like that they were from another planet or they were aliens or something, and there was all of us, there was all of us, and then there was them.
Yeah.
And I didn't like it at all, and I didn't find that to be true. Not with the people that had BPD in my life. I didn't find that to be true at all. And in fact, a lot of the ways that they recommended that you treat them would make anyone insane, but especially somebody who was struggling with emotion dysregulation. So they used to call me CBT Queen in school because I loved cognitive behavioral therapy. And so I ended up finding Cognitive Behavioral Therapy for Borderline Personality Disorder. That was Linehan's first book. So I read it, and I remember reading it, and you don't want to start from the beginning of the book. extremely dense. But I remember reading it and nodding as I was reading it, like, oh my God, yes, this is exactly right. And the part that I really liked was the part on therapy interfering behavior. So rather than this was radical in back when I was in school, rather than pretend like you weren't noticing that the other person was behaving badly, for example, or you would just ignore it, or you would just underreact. You would directly address it. So you would say, hey, when you're doing that, I don't like it, or you just be really frank. And that was consistent with my personality. It was consistent with what I knew about the people that I was around, that I loved and cared about, that had BPD. It was, you didn't have to tiptoe. And in fact, if you did tiptoe, you were going to be not happy with the result, because nobody likes to be treated like they're crazy. Nobody.
Yes. Yeah.
And if you're like, okay, let's just, anybody talking to you like that, you just want to shake.
Yeah.
And so I get that. I understand that innately. And I think people trust me because I do say things that aren't necessarily the easiest to hear, but it's like better to get that out and talk about it than it is to guess and wonder and keep it inside and everything.
Yeah.
So even as difficult as some of the interactions have been that I've had with patients, where I've had to say that I don't like this and it's really awkward, the people that I've worked with have an amazing resilience that I think is underestimated by the majority of people who don't struggle. And I would tell new therapists, I say, these folks have been through a lot. You look at people who've been through trauma, you look at BPD, they've been through a lot. Don't kid yourself and think that you're going to say something or you're going to, that's going to just break them. That's insulting. So you just do the best that you can, and then let them worry about themselves, and you can give them, tools and stuff. That's why you're there. But you're not there to tiptoe around and act like that they're a tiger in a cage.
Did that make a difference in your life? Did you start using these?
I already was. That was the thing. With good therapy, it's not new. People always say, well, this isn't new. Yeah, it's not new, but it's maybe packaged differently. If you take a can of tomatoes and, some ground beef, you can do with some rice, maybe. You can do a whole lot of things. You can make chili, you can make spaghetti sauce, and a lot of it depends on the spices that you add. Same with therapy. I mean, you've got your basic components that are important. And whatever you add to it's the spice. I mean, I have some of my own spices, that I'll add to therapy. I think everybody adds their own spice, but the basics are the same. I didn't treat them any differently. It was already in place, like validation, trying to get the other person understanding, at least in some rudimentary way, of what they're experiencing.
What I hear with you as well is like you're committed to your commitment rather than your concern. Like, there's the commitment and concern. Like, a lot of people want to people please.
Yeah.
So like even as professionals, it's like, I'll do my job, but I still want to please you. So if you like me, I've done a good job, and that's not the case. It's like, well,
somebody's got to tell them.
Well, yeah, that's like in our line of work. Like, Arthur's not always liked. Well, he's not always liked, and he says, sweetheart, that's okay. I don't have to be liked. I just need to make a difference to that family.
That's right. And that's really, that's the sacrifice that good therapists make, I think. Because I also have lots of sayings, but I have this one saying. I said, this ain't a tea party. In therapy, it's not a tea party. We're not trying to, now it's your turn to talk, and now it's my turn to talk, and now how's the weather? And great, how's the weather for you? There's a certain back and forth that needs to happen, and we all know the rules, when it comes to a tea party. But when it comes to therapy, we don't necessarily know the rules, and that's okay. We talked about a client that had some really strong suicidal thinking recently in consult, and one of the new therapists says, well, how do I bring this up? I said, according to what I've got here, it was, some data. I said, you don't have to, you just jump right in. We know each other now. We put the nuances aside. Not how's the weather. Why did you try to kill yourself 28 times? We can cut through all of the bullshit and just go straight for that.
What is your, because obviously you deal with a lot of people that come here with some, some conditions which can be quite challenging. Like, what's your? I'm not going to use the word self-care because it's done to death. But
And you know me better than that.
Yeah, I'd be like, I'm not gonna say. But how do you take care of yourself though? Like, because honestly, when you come out of a session, it must. Well, I'm just putting my stuff onto you. There could be an impact of having a whole day of dealing with clients. So how do you relax?
So, to be fair, I see a lot less clients than I used to. When I was at the VA and when I was in community mental health, I mean, I was seeing 8 people a day, back to back. It's not that way anymore.
I'm sorry, I just interrupted you. That fascinated me when I read that about you. So what's the work that you did with the VA and all of the work that you did with the military as well? It's fascinating.
Yeah, I did exposure for combat vets. Exposure is some of the hardest stuff that you'd ever do, but also the most rewarding. So I was the sole prolonged exposure therapist there, which meant that when I would see guys back to back, and women too. I did military sexual trauma work also. But they would come in, sit down, they would tell me their story. I would coach them on how to do it from beginning to end, some graphic stuff from beginning to end, go back, rewind, tell it again, tell it to slow down right there, okay, pause, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I would hear multiple stories throughout the day. I did some groups also, but it wasn't DBT, that wasn't what I was doing there, it was pure exposure.
Wow. So, like, what sort of stuff would you be doing with the exposures? So like talking about it?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a pretty simple idea. It's as close to surgery as we get as therapists. You take the primary trauma. It's, they may have multiple. There's always one that stands out, one or two, and then they pick that. And you start just a narrative with them. They tell it, and there's the idea that in order to fully process, you have to be able to integrate it into your verbal. So they're articulating all of it and they're getting the same fear structure back. We have to be able to activate the fear structure, as they say, which means they have to be scared.
Yes.
They have to be scared. They have to cry sometimes. That's the bottom line for us in therapy a lot of times, isn't it? We have to, they have to cry. And then the more you process through it, the more you, what's referred to as habituate, get used to it.
Yeah.
And it becomes what it really is, which is a memory and not the thing that's happening now. But that requires a lot, some patience. It requires, that took the most emotional energy of anything I've ever done, because you hear some really awful stuff. And they talk about vicarious trauma for therapists and having heard things. I used to have a friend of mine, he worked there also, great counselor, Dan Edwards, and we would, he's an LPC, we would talk and process stuff afterwards. I call and say, okay, I got to tell you, what I heard. And it's the same thing the guys were doing. They were telling their story. Well, we would tell our stories, to each other. And there were times I'd come home and and it would be like late afternoon, early evening, and I couldn't talk. Like I was just silent. And then you just need to cry. I mean, again, bottom line is crying, is very underrated. I think we all need to cry, just like we all need to pee. We all need to cry, but we don't all need to do that in front of one another. See, that's the difference. Some people are very private. I'm very private. You're not going to catch me, sitting here crying in front of you. I'm not going to be doing that with most of the people.
I might show you a really sad movie. You might cry.
I would totally do that. That is within my parameters. It's socially acceptable. I'm like, that's fine. But that goes back to the respecting everybody's, limits, boundaries, whatever, in terms of what they're okay with opening up to. And so I would go, I would cry, go run, cry really, really, really hard. And then if you just, there's no substitute, really. I mean, you've got to feel like that. Spirituality is important to me also. So we were talking before you even came in, and, me and, I can't remember who I was talking to. That's terrible. But I was talking to someone, and I said, and I said, Diane, Diane's coming, and he said, she's just so sparkly. I think it was Sarah. Just such a sparkly personality, a lot like Lauren Martin, who works here. And you know, I know you must know this. I hope that people tell you, but you know, you bring out, you know, good things in people, and
Thank
you know, you have a great energy that when you come in the room. And if you tried to be somebody else, it wouldn't work, you know. And like if you tried to do some of the stern type stuff that I do, it wouldn't work. And Lauren Martin tried to do some of the stuff that she saw me do, and it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's you've got to be you.
You've got to be, yeah.
And you have a way of being able to get people better and, you know, help them heal. That's
Yeah.
your way and not my way.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, like, yeah, it's the truth. You've got to do you.
That's what I'm passionate about, is teaching therapists. I want therapists to do a good job. I want them to be true to themselves too. And so many times I see them not be real. You know, that they would talk to a client in a way they would never talk to somebody if they met them on a plane. You know, you're on a plane and someone says, "Hey, do you have kids?" You know, you go, "Yeah" or "No." You don't go, "Tell me about what that means to you."
I know, because it's like this professional etiquette thing. It's like you can't give too much away. It's like like being on guard. It's like you can't be you. Like there is an element, you know, like, I don't want to go down, that's another conversation, but that boundary.
Yeah.
There is a boundary, because then it's all enmeshed, but you've got to be real at the same time. You know, I don't envy you guys. You know, it's definitely, you've got to be chosen to do it. I think it's a vocation. Like, what would you say to somebody that is watching this and actually, how do you know when to go for therapy? How do you know? How do you know when you, like, I know you said at the beginning how people don't need a therapist and there's not a particular way. But if somebody's watching and they're dealing with something, how do you know this is the right time for you to go to therapy?
I couldn't know that.
Yeah.
They're the only ones who know. You know, because it's true. If somebody tells you that you should go to therapy, it's true that therapy can help, for sure. And it's also true therapy can hurt. And therapy can harm.
Like what? Like say more about
a
that.
shitty therapist. There are such things, and we all know there are.
Gazooks. No way.
So, I mean, it's important to find somebody who, you know, you're going to be able to take advice from, or you're going to be able to feel like, here's your problem, and listens to you and is interested in you, isn't just trying to get the next person on the books, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what I like about where I am now is that, you know, I see clients on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and I take, you know, just a few people. Those people are super important to me, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not someone where I'm just churning a bunch of people in and out. All my therapists here, they have a, you have to see this many people. You know, they all decide how many that they see, and so they know their limit and their threshold, and that's part of what makes a good therapist is not being overworked and not being burnt out.
You got a good thing here. Like I remember a conversation. You guys are like a family.
We are.
That's what I love. Like maybe sometimes a dysfunctional family.
Maybe dysfunctional, but I'm in charge, and so it's okay.
Yeah, that's all that matters, really. Isn't it? But no, but I do love that, because it is about, you got to practice what you preach. So when you do something, I'm going to refer to that John Maxwell thing again. Not that it's, but he was saying in the interview, and I believe this anyway. It's like, if you're going to tell somebody to do something, you got to be it before anything.
Or you got to at least be willing. You know, be willing to do it.
What I love is at the core of everything that you guys do, it's like a creation between you all. Like that's what I feel. Is that you guys create together, and it's genuinely nurturing. You guys are fun together, and
we like each other.
Which is, wow, that's a bonus, yeah?
It is. It's really nice.
Yeah.
I like when people talk about that, because it helps me, you know, remember and settle into it, because it's so easy to think about the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, you know, and to really, yeah, you know, it is. It's nice. As it is. It's nice.
Just as it is.
Yeah.
And, okay, what are the three most important, like, aside from therapy and all this, three most important things in your life? Things, people, whatever it is. What's the three?
Spirituality, number one. I don't even know two other ones. I mean, that goes without saying. I hate being cliche, you know?
Yeah, then sometimes it is cliche, though.
Yeah.
You don't have to say them, because they know it. You can say, you know.
It all ties back, though. To me, it does all tie back to spirituality. When I say that, I mean, like, love, and that's so gushy of somebody like me to say. But it really is, when with our kids, it's love. When you are helping somebody in therapy, it's love. When you contribute, when you give to people, that's love. And when you let something go instead of hate, So to me, it all comes back to that.
Spirituality and love. What's the third thing that you're the most passionate about?
Whatever the word is for taking a chance or being bold or,
You're
like risk, I guess. Risk to some degree.
is opening. What's the biggest risk you've taken?
This place, I was going through a divorce at the time. It was a bad situation, and I didn't know if I was going to be able to make my house payment. I didn't know if I was going to be able to. I could have moved in with my parents. I'm not saying I wouldn't have had, a fallback, because my parents are super great and would have let me, move in with them. But I didn't want to move in with my parents, and so I remember thinking, like, either you're going to do it now or you're never going to do it. It was the worst time to do it.
Yeah.
It was absolutely the worst time to do it. And I was like, well, no time like now, And so I did. I hired Sarah on salary, which I didn't think I could afford. And it worked out, obviously. It worked out.
Wow.
So it was taking the chance, but I felt like it was a chance, but I didn't feel like it was at the same time. I felt like that was what I was supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just kind of doing what I was supposed to do.
I love it. You're following your heart.
Yeah.
Okay, the last thing I want to ask you is, so like anybody watching, if you could just give them just a tidbit of just a tip about life, just like
We don't have a control group. So life doesn't have a control group, that's what I always say. We do a study, and it's like you've got the intervention, you give them the drug, and then we compare it to the control group, the one that doesn't get the drug, and we see, was there an effect? Well, we don't have a control group. We can't go back and say, well, I should have done this, because here was my life if I didn't do that. So it doesn't matter, and it doesn't benefit us to go back and regret or wish that we had done something different, or stand still and think, oh, I don't know if I should do this, or if I should, our indecisiveness, because there are so many different ways that you can go, so many different paths, and at the end of the day, you don't have a control group to compare it to see if it's going to work out, so don't even go there, Just your whole heart in whatever path it is that you're taking.
Stephanie.